Welcome back, guys. So in the previous video, we have seen the migration from library to testing environment, right? And then we create we have done the approval, and then we need to do one more thing, which is what we call documentation. So whenever we make the change, we need to documentation, right? So now you can see that there are two things, right? Audit trail is a set of some information, documentation is another information. So audit trail, as I mentioned to you guys, that's for the accountability purposes to find out who exactly does change and what are the changes has to be done, right? The documentation is an audit trail, remember, is created by system generated. But documentation is created by the programmer who made the change. That is for the system maintenance for purposes, for example. And one programmer make the change today, and when tomorrow he's going to be absent, but tomorrow creates some issues because of the change we made, right? So then whoever program is going to look into the program in the future should know what are the exactly changes has been done in the past, so that it's good to have a documentation for them to reference for the system maintenance purposes. So remember, there are two kind of information kept. One is documentation, that's for the maintenance purposes kept by the programmers, and then audit trail, system generated, read only file, offsite. Okay. Now after the documentation, what we do the, what do you think, which one we should do? Then we should do the testing to make sure that whatever the change we have made is not compromising the system, there's no problem happens with the system, and no additional issues create the system, and you are extremely happy with the system. So right, then we do testing. Okay, then after testing, what we should do, we go back to the predictable process, remember, and then we are going to the next step, which is presenting to the change control board. So there's a specific board, we call it change control board. So they have expertise to look into the changes, look into the testing results, and see that, like, this is a legitimate change, and this is something that we should do. Now its system is better than used to be before, or something added features, a problem has been, depending on the maintenance we have done, right? Now what we should do now, then now we have tested everything is all right, change control board says this is all right. The next thing is going to be the implementation. As I mentioned to you guys before, what is implementation means? Implementation means we put the things to the production environment. So we do the next migration, production environment. So remember, every migration there should be two things happen. Actually, three things should happen. First one is should be approval. Second one is there should be a audit trail, okay, and then there should be a documentation. So all things should happen when we do the implementation, right? Now we have one more question here. When we do the implementation, is it possible the current, when we really use, even though we have done testing, but real testing, remember, is the when we use the system. When we use the system, we found more issues than before the change. Is it possible? Yes, very possible. So what we need to do is we are not going to throw away our previous version. So we keep the previous version is also in the library. That means in the library we might keep different versions, the latest version and the previous version. And then if the current version having an issue, what we need to do is we are going back to the previous version. We call it as a rollback, because in this case, whatever the software copies, but what we keep in the library, we keep something called version numbers. So when it comes to version numbers, when we create the version numbers, when we create maybe a file for cost registration system, we write cost registration, and then we might keep the timestamp. That means which time, which date, which time. So that could be a file number, version number. So whenever we want to look back, so we can find exactly which version, which file, which version, which they created, that we need to roll back to the back again, because the current the best one or new one is having issues. Okay, so remember that. So there is always should have a possibility to go back to previous versions, because sometimes the real testing is going to be the when we use it, we might find more problems than what we had it before. So that's something you need to remember. Okay, right? And then sometimes in smaller organizations, It's very difficult to have a separation of duties. That means one man show. So IT department, they have only one single person, right? That's very possible. So it's happening. So now, in this case, to be compliant and assurance, are we going to tell them, no, 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 this is not acceptable, or this is not according to the change management, okay? So you guys need to hire someone else. Does it work? Is it a realistic recommendation? As someone that we make recommendation to be comply with regulations? Not really. So in this case, we have one solution. Can you guys think about what would be the best solution in this situation? The best solution would it be, remember, every change, there should be audit trail happens. So usually who would look at the audit trail? Audit trails being looked by, probably if you have internal auditor within your organization, that person may come and have a look at the audit trail. Okay, but they may not look at that regularly. Most of the organization, they don't have internal auditor within the organization. So what they rely on, the external auditors come, and from a big 4 company, external auditor would come and look at the audit trails, right? So external auditors comes like once a year. But in this case, programmers do the change by themselves without approval, because there's no way to have separation of duties. And then somebody comes in once a year and have a look at it. Is it a good idea? Of course not. Remember that 1 year could be a long period of time. If program has done some bad things, within 1 year you will be out of business. They can do a lot of damages to your organization. So 1 is a long time. So in this case, the management should look into audit trail by themselves regularly. Depending on a number of transactions happens in each day, maybe looking at once a week, maybe looking at maybe once in 2 weeks, but regularly need to look at the audit trail. So how we look at the audit trail? So can we look at everything, every transactions, everything's in audit trail? Of course, it's not possible. So what we do is we might take a random sample. How to take a random sample? I will let you know later. So we take a sample of the change and we'll check for the here in this case we don't have approval, but what we'll do is we'll check, see whether that is a legitimate change, whether the program has done something bad for him to have any benefit, personal benefit. So that's very important. So the most important thing is this: every organization should have what we call change management procedures. Remember, procedures should come from the senior management, right? So senior management should have a procedure and make sure that every change happens to your systems should go through this predictable process. That means, most importantly, at the very beginning is approval, right? Understand? And then documentation and the audit trail. But remember, at the same time, audit trail is going to be system generated, because it's difficult to trust people. People always do some bad things. So if we really want to have a compliance and assurance, we should make sure that audit trail has to be created. All right? Okay.